What happens when two of the most outspoken women in media sit across from each other with absolutely nothing left to lose? Today we're diving into the most explosive interview that has everyone talking, where Meghan Markle faced off against Megyn Kelly in what started as a simple promotional appearance, but quickly turned into something nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because this is going to be wild. The studio lights were blazing hot that afternoon as Megyn Kelly adjusted her notes one final time. She had conducted thousands of interviews throughout her career, but something about this particular booking felt different. Meghan Markle was scheduled to appear on The Megyn Kelly Show to discuss her latest humanitarian project, a seemingly straightforward interview that should have been smooth sailing. "We're live in 30 seconds, called out the floor director as the makeup artist gave Megyn one last powder touch. Across the studio, Megyn sat composed in her chair, her publicist whispering last-minute talking points in her ear. The atmosphere was professional, cordial even, but there was an underlying tension that seemed to crackle through the air. Good afternoon and welcome back to The Megyn Kelly Show. I'm your host, Megyn Kelly, and joining me today is Meghan Markle to discuss her new initiative supporting women's education globally. Megyn began with her trademark smile. "Megyn, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me, Megyn," Megyn replied, her voice warm but measured. "I'm excited to talk about something that's so close to my heart." The first few minutes proceeded exactly as planned. They discussed the education initiative, the partnerships Megyn had formed, and the impact they hoped to make. But Megyn Kelly hadn't built her reputation by sticking to safe topics, and it wasn't long before she began to probe deeper. "Now, Megyn, this focus on women's empowerment is something you've been passionate about for years. But I have to ask, given some of the criticism you've faced about your own approach to handling media attention, how do you respond to those who say there's a disconnect between your advocacy and your actions?" Megyn's smile flickered for just a moment, but she maintained her composure. "I think that's an interesting question, Megyn. I've always believed that standing up for what's right sometimes means making difficult choices. Not everyone will understand those choices, and that's okay. But surely you can understand why some people might find it contradictory when someone who left their royal duties citing media intrusion continues to court that same media attention through interviews, documentaries, and public appearances?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Megyn shifted slightly in her chair, her media training kicking in. But there was a flash of something sharper in her eyes. "I think what you're referring to as courting attention is actually using my platform to create positive change. There's a significant difference between being hunted by tabloids and choosing to speak about causes that matter." Megyn leaned forward slightly, sensing she had hit a nerve. "But doesn't that distinction feel a bit convenient? You can't have it both ways, can you? Either you're a private person who values privacy, or you're a public figure who engages with media. The back and forth seems, well, calculated." "Calculated?" Megyn's voice carried a slight edge now. "Megyn, I find it interesting that when men make strategic decisions about their careers and their families, they're called smart businessmen. But when a woman, especially a woman of color, makes similar choices, suddenly it's calculated and manipulative." "Oh, so now this is about race?" Megyn's eyebrows raised. "I didn't mention race at all. I'm simply pointing out what appears to be inconsistent messaging." "You didn't have to mention race explicitly, but let's not pretend that's not part of the subtext here. The way I've been covered, the way my story has been twisted, it's not happening in a vacuum, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The studio crew exchanged glances. This was definitely not going according to the pre-interview discussion. The publicist in the corner looked like she might be sick. Megyn pressed on, her journalist instincts fully engaged. "Megyn, I think you're deflecting from the actual question. This isn't about race or gender. It's about consistency. You've made statements about wanting privacy while simultaneously signing multi-million-dollar deals with streaming platforms to tell your story. Can you see how that might confuse people?" Megyn's composure was starting to crack, and her voice took on a sharper tone. "What confuses me, Megyn, is this obsession with painting me as some kind of manipulative mastermind. God forbid a woman should take control of her own narrative after years of having it controlled by others." "But that's exactly my point," Megyn shot back. You talk about having your narrative controlled, yet you've had unprecedented access to major media platforms. You've had primetime specials, magazine covers, your own production deals. Most people would consider that having quite a lot of control over your narrative. Most people haven't had their every move scrutinized, their family relationships dissected, and their mental health questioned by millions of strangers. Megyn replied, her voice rising slightly. It's easy to judge from the outside, but you have no idea what it's actually like. The interview was clearly veering into uncharted territory, and both women seemed to realize they were approaching a point of no return. Megyn Kelly had interviewed presidents, celebrities, and world leaders. But she could feel this conversation slipping away from her control in a way that felt both dangerous and exhilarating. She decided to double down. Actually, Megyn, I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's like. I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I've faced public scrutiny, career setbacks, and personal attacks. The difference is, I don't blame everyone else for the choices I made. Megyn's eyes widened, and for a moment, the polished facade completely dropped. Are you seriously comparing your experience as a established white television host to what I went through? Really? I'm comparing the experience of being a public figure who faces criticism, yes. And what I learned is that if you can't handle the heat, maybe you shouldn't have stepped into the kitchen in the first place. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Megyn sat back in her chair, and when she spoke again, her voice was dangerously calm. If I can't handle the heat, Megyn, I handled death threats. I handled having my mixed-race heritage used as a weapon against me. I handled watching my father sell stories to tabloids. I handled being isolated from my support system while dealing with suicidal thoughts. So please, tell me more about handling heat. Megyn realized she may have pushed too far, but her competitive instincts kicked in. And I respect that those were difficult experiences. But you also chose to air those experiences in the most public way possible. You chose to do a tell-all interview watched by millions. You chose to include those details in your Netflix series. At what point do you take responsibility for keeping your private struggles public? Take responsibility? Megyn's voice was getting louder now. Take responsibility for what, exactly? For speaking my truth? For refusing to be silenced? You know what, Megyn? This is exactly the problem. When women speak up about their experiences, especially difficult ones, we're told we're being too dramatic, too emotional, that we should just shut up and deal with it privately. That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it. What I'm saying is that you can't monetize your pain and then act surprised when people question your motives. Monetize my pain? Megyn's composure finally snapped completely. How dare you reduce my story to a money grab? Do you have any idea how much easier it would have been to just disappear quietly? To take the criticism and never say another word? The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming the most explosive television moment of the year. The production team was frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let it continue. Megyn, sensing she had struck a nerve, pressed further. But you didn't disappear quietly, did you? You signed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You wrote books, you did podcasts, you created content. And all of it centered around your experience as a victim. That's not healing, Megyn, that's a business model. A business model? Megyn stood up from her chair, something that never happens during a sit-down interview. You think this is a business model? You think I enjoy having my life dissected by people like you who pretend to care about journalism but really just want to tear down anyone who threatens the status quo? Megyn remained seated but leaned forward. I think you enjoy being the center of attention, and you've found a way to make being a victim profitable. There's a difference between sharing your story to help others and weaponizing your experiences for personal gain. Weaponizing? Megyn's voice was incredulous. The only person weaponizing anything here is you, Megyn. You invited me on this show under the pretense of discussing my charitable work, and instead you've spent the entire time trying to paint me as some kind of opportunist. This is exactly the kind of ambush journalism that destroys people's trust in media. It's called asking follow-up questions, Megyn. It's called not just accepting talking points at face value. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your public statements and actions, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Basic scrutiny? Megyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't scrutiny. This is character assassination dressed up as journalism. And honestly, I'm not surprised it's coming from you. The gloves were completely off now. Megyn sat up straighter, her professional demeanor cracking. What exactly is that supposed to mean? It means that your entire career has been built on controversy and division. You make a living out of tearing people down, and then hiding behind the banner of journalism. At least I'm honest about what I'm doing. And what exactly are you doing, Megyn? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having a complete meltdown on national television because someone asked you some tough questions. Megyn took a step closer to Megyn's desk. What I'm doing is refusing to let you control this narrative the way you've tried to control every other interview. You came into this thinking you could manipulate me, make me look unstable or opportunistic, and I'm not going to let that happen. Nobody is trying to manipulate you, Megyn. But your reaction right now is pretty telling. This is exactly what I was talking about. You can't handle any criticism without making it about everyone else being out to get you. The studio audience, which had been completely silent, was now visibly uncomfortable. Some people were shifting in their seats. Others were pulling out their phones to record what was clearly going to be a viral moment. You know what's telling, Megyn? The fact that you think this is normal. The fact that you think it's acceptable to invite someone on your show and then spend the entire time trying to humiliate them. This isn't journalism. This is entertainment at my expense. Megyn finally stood up as well, matching Megyn's energy. Entertainment? You think this is entertainment? Megyn, you are the one who turned this into a spectacle. I asked legitimate questions about public statements you've made, and you've turned it into some kind of persecution complex. Persecution complex? Megyn's voice was now loud enough that it could probably be heard in the hallway outside the studio. Let me tell you about persecution, Megyn. Persecution is having your every word twisted. Persecution is having people question your mental health because you dared to speak up. Persecution is being called difficult and demanding for setting boundaries. The tension in the room was so thick it was almost suffocating, and both women seemed to realize they were standing at the edge of something that could change both of their careers forever. The producer was frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but both women were too locked in their verbal battle to notice. What had started as a routine interview had become a full-blown confrontation that neither seemed willing to back down from. Megyn took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of professional control. Megyn, I think you need to sit down and collect yourself. This is exactly the kind of behavior that people are talking about when they say you're difficult to work with. Difficult to work with? Megyn's laugh was sharp and bitter. There at Island. The word every powerful woman gets labeled with when she refuses to be bullied. Hillary Clinton was difficult. Kamala Harris was difficult. Any woman who doesn't smile and nod, and play along with whatever narrative you want to create, gets called difficult. This has nothing to do with you being a woman, Megyn. This has to do with you being unable to have a rational conversation without making everything about your victimhood. My victimhood? Megyn stepped even closer to Megyn's desk. You mean my lived experience? My truth? The things that actually happened to me? Sorry if my reality is inconvenient for your narrative. Megyn matched her intensity. Your truth, Megyn, seems to change depending on what's most beneficial for you at any given moment. One day you're a private person who just wants to be left alone. The next day you're on every major platform telling your story. One day you're grateful for your royal experience. The next day it was traumatic. Which version should we believe? All of it, Megyn shot back immediately. People are complex, Megyn. Experiences are complex. Just because you need everything to fit into a neat little box for your viewers doesn't mean that's how real life works. I can be grateful for some parts of my experience and traumatized by others. I can want privacy for my family while still using my platform for good. But you can't expect people not to question those contradictions, especially when there are millions of dollars involved. Everything comes back to money with you people, doesn't it? God forbid someone should be compensated for their work, for their story, for the hell they've been put through. When male executives get paid millions, nobody questions their motives. But when I sign a deal, suddenly I'm a money-hungry opportunist. Megyn shook her head. This isn't about gender, Megyn. And you making it about gender doesn't make your inconsistencies disappear. This is about accountability. Accountability? Megyn's voice reached a new level of intensity. Let's talk about accountability, Megyn. Let's talk about your accountability as a journalist. Did you do any research before this interview? Did you actually look into the work I'm doing, the lives being changed, the impact being made? Or did you just decide to use this platform to take cheap shots? I did my research, which is exactly why I'm asking these questions. Your charitable work is admirable, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum separate from everything else you've done. Everything else I've done? You mean surviving? You mean finding my voice? You mean refusing to be silenced by an institution that was perfectly happy to protect everyone except me? The raw emotion in Megyn's voice seemed to catch even Megyn off guard for a moment, but she recovered quickly. Megyn, you're not the first person to have a difficult experience with powerful institutions, and you won't be the last. What makes you special is not what happened to you, it's how you've chosen to handle it. And how exactly should I have handled it, Megyn? Please, enlighten me. Should I have stayed quiet while my character was assassinated? Should I have let them drive me to the point where I didn't want to be alive anymore, and just accepted that as the price of marrying into that family? The studio fell dead silent. Even Megyn seemed momentarily stunned by the raw honesty of that statement. Should I have let them continue to use my race as a weapon against me while pretending they were protecting the dignity of the institution? Should I have let them destroy my relationship with my father, and then act like I was the problem? Tell me, Megyn, what would you have done? For the first time in the entire interview, Megyn seemed to struggle for words. But her competitive nature wouldn't let her back down completely. I would have handled it privately. I would have worked within the system to create change instead of burning it all down and then profiting from the ashes. Privately? Megyn's voice was incredulous. The same way they handled everything privately? The way they privately briefed against me to the press? The way they privately allowed racist coverage to continue unchecked? The way they privately refused to protect me or my son? That kind of private? You're twisting everything I'm saying, Megyn. No, I'm responding to exactly what you're saying. You think I should have suffered in silence to protect people who were actively harming me. You think I should have prioritized their comfort over my own survival. And you wonder why women don't trust institutions to protect them. Megyn tried one more time to regain control of the situation. What I think is that there's a difference between protecting yourself and weaponizing your platform to settle scores. Settling scores? Megyn's voice was now loud enough that security was starting to look concerned. Is that what you think this is about? Revenge? Settling scores? Megyn, I am trying to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other women. I'm trying to use my experience to create change. But people like you are so invested in tearing me down that you can't even see that. And what about the collateral damage, Megyn? What about the relationships you've destroyed, the institution you've damaged, the family members you've hurt with your very public revelations? What about them? Megyn threw her hands up. What about my well-being? What about my son's safety? What about my right to tell my own story? Since when is it my responsibility to protect people who didn't protect me? The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what was clearly the most explosive interview either woman had ever been part of. The production team had given up trying to control the situation and was just documenting what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments in recent memory. Megyn made one final attempt to end on a professional note. Megyn, I appreciate you coming on the show today to discuss your charitable work. Do you? Megyn's response was ice cold. Because it seems like you brought me here to ambush me, not to discuss my work. And you know what? This interview says a lot more about you and your approach to journalism than it does about me. I think our viewers can judge for themselves what this interview reveals about both of us. I think they can too, Megyn replied, finally moving to unclip her microphone. And I think they'll see exactly what I've been talking about. Thank you for proving my point. Better than I ever could have myself. As Megyn walked off the set, the studio remained in stunned silence. Megyn turned back to the camera, trying to regain her composure, but the damage was done. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview had turned into something much bigger, much more revealing, and much more dangerous for both women involved. So what did you think about this explosive confrontation? Did Megyn Kelly go too far with her questioning? Or was she just doing her job as a journalist? Was Meghan Markle justified in her reaction, or did she lose control of the situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, And make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. What other celebrity interviews do you think went completely off the rails?